Hi, welcome to Ottawa English. I'm Angela, and today we're looking at a sample answer for the long writing section in the CAEL test. The long writing is based on a reading and a lecture. So this reading is a little bit shorter than what you would typically get. You would normally get about 800 words, and this is about 400. So it's about half the amount of text. And it says, scant physical evidence remains of the first human domestication of grain. Still, there is enough to conclude that ancient peoples, motivated by the nutritional value of bread or cakes made of wild wheat, looked for controlled ways to grow it, to provide a consistent food supply. 3 related discoveries are likely to have led to the introduction of bread as the first grain-based food. The first discovery was that wheat could be prepared for use by grinding. People probably began consuming wheat by chewing it raw. Because wheat is very hard, they gradually discovered that it was less trouble to eat if crushed to a paste between 2 stones. The result would have been the ancestor of the drier, more powdery wheat flour we use today. From there, it was a short step to the next breakthrough, baking the simplest bread, which required no technology but fire. Loaves of wheat paste, when baked into bread, could be stored for long periods, certainly longer than raw seeds. This kept the food value of wheat available for an extended period after it had been harvested. Finally, ancient peoples found that if the paste was allowed to sit in the open, yeast spores from the air settled on it and began fermenting the wheat. This natural process of fermentation caused bubbles to form in the wheat paste, suggesting that it would be lighter in texture and even easier to eat when baked. So that is the reading section. And then you have a lecture that you have to listen to. You only listen to it one time. And this lecture is about the same length, and it says, conventional wisdom says that a very primitive kind of bread was the first grain food that human societies ate. But, for the last few decades, there's been an alternative hypothesis that quite a few anthropologists are starting to give a closer look. That hypothesis says that it was, in fact, beer, not bread, that was the first grain food. Sound strange? Consider a couple of things. For one thing, you don't have to grind wheat to make it easier to eat. If you keep it in a moist environment, it naturally starts sprouting, with a new baby plant splitting the hard seed case in half. Sprouted wheat is sweeter, softer, and actually more nutritious than whole wheat seeds, and it would have developed without human effort. In order to discover the usefulness of ground wheat, someone had to get the bright idea of crushing it. To discover the usefulness of sprouted wheat, people just had to let it sit. Which do you think happened first? Another thing, what turns grain into beer is fermentation, and wheat begins to ferment almost as soon as it's stored, from water and yeast in the air. After the wheat sprouted, it would have started to ferment. The process would have been obvious because of the bubbles and foam that formed. People could have experimented by tasting it and discovering the first beer. And even if you assume that people were already grinding wheat to paste, think about it. The paste ferments and bubbles. Is it likely that early peoples would have thought to fire it before eating? We're used to cooking our food, but in prehistoric times, the idea that you would take fire to food to improve it for eating wasn't obvious. So you've had the reading and you've had the lecture, and now we get a question. In your opinion, should universities continue to offer courses in anthropology, or is the subject redundant in today's world? So that question asks us for our opinion, and it asks us whether anthropology is still a relevant subject or whether it's now redundant. So as we write our essay, we need to make sure we pick up all our points for organization. So we'll have an introduction, we'll have a reason, either the reading or the lecture as our example. Then we'll have our second reason, our second paragraph, which will either do the lecture or the reading. So you're going to do one paragraph referring to an example in the reading and one paragraph referring to an example in the lecture. But you choose which order you want to do that. And once we've done that, you'll have a conclusion. For the introduction, I would say, in today's world, the notion that anthropology, the study of mankind, might be redundant as a subject of study at university is held by some. However, I tend to think that a thorough and solid understanding of humanity is maybe more important now than it has ever been. And so what I've done here is I've paraphrased the question to introduce my topic, and then I've given my opinion, and I've identified the two things that I'm going to be talking about. Then I have my first reason, and for me it made sense to start with the reading. So I'd say conventional wisdom, however logical it may appear, provides a very shaky foundation for understanding the evolution of human societies. This lack of solidity is reflected in the reading, where the author lays out the process by which grain was domesticated, beginning with the grinding of grain into a wheat paste and allowing it to ferment naturally before being subjected to heat and baked into bread. This idea that a food would need to be ground and cooked before becoming a food transposes modern society's norms onto prehistoric peoples. Anthropologists prevent that misconception from taking place and becoming accepted fact. So what I've done here is I've identified what I'm planning to talk about, and then I've said what the process is in the reading as my example, and then I've identified why that's a problem. Then I go on to my second paragraph, where I do pretty much the same thing. With their scientific evidence, anthropologists put forward a very different process that ultimately led to the first grain food being beer, not bread. The lecture describes how easily wheat sprouts into a food that is far more tasty, tender, and nutrient-rich than the original seed. No human effort is required during this natural process, just humidity. Given this delicious food that requires no heat or processing and ultimately ferments into a beer-like food, it's unlikely that prehistoric people would have gone to the trouble of grinding or cooking it. So first of all, I'm saying what my paragraph is about, then I'm giving an example from the lecture, and then I'm saying why that's important. And then we have a conclusion. All told, the study of anthropology should continue because it sheds a great deal of light on the evolution of human society. Without anthropology, we're left believing falsehoods that transfer our modern lifestyles onto prehistoric peoples, resulting in an erroneous historical perspective. And so what I have here is my opinion that anthropology should continue, and then the reason why I think it should continue. It's important as you write your essay that you use lots of references, and you can see here I've used it, this, where, and that. It's also important to use plenty of subordination, and here I've got one by which grain was domesticated, another one here before being subjected to heat, another one here before becoming a food, another one here with their scientific evidence, and another one here because it sheds a great deal of light on the evolution of human society. It's very important to have all of these references and the subordination, along with plenty of sentence variety. There are 5 things to remember when you write your CAEL essay for the long writing. The first one is to identify your reasons in the introduction, as well as doing a paraphrase. The second one is to elaborate on your 2 main ideas in the paragraphs. One paragraph should refer to the reading, and the other paragraph should refer to the lecture. The third thing is to follow a nice clear structure. You want to pick up all your points for organization, because you might lose some on grammar or content. Introduction, main idea, and conclusion. And one main idea is from the reading and the others from the lecture, but you choose the order that makes most sense. The fourth thing is to remember to use referencing and subordination. And finally, make sure that you leave a line space between your introduction and your first main idea, between your first and second main ideas, and between your second main idea and conclusion. If you're about to take your test, best of luck. But if you need a little bit of help, do give me a call or text me at 613-614-6460. I can help you with a little bit of test preparation. I provide tutoring, writing correction and speaking correction, and for all the pricing and more information, either contact me or go to my website at www.ottawa-english.com. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye now.